also have 3 kids. Now, Alonso is part of the varsity of their basketball team. So it's so difficult for me. It's a new way of going about parenting and feeding him this time because first time, so she didn't eat as much. And for Alonso, it had to be carbs, it had to be a lot of protein, but also not too fat. He has to be lean. Sometimes, diba, we associate being fat to be healthy. They say, ay, pumapayat yung bata, so hindi siya healthy. Kailangan mo, feelings mo as a mom, and so doing wrong, or what should I be doing right? And for Ilio, it's more vegetables for me now because he's so chunky. Yan naman siya, medyo chunky naman siya. And what I love about feeding Ilio is that a lot of different resources now for food, right? And a lot of availabilities for us. But I still keep thinking, am I feeding him right? Does that equate for something? And kahit mabusog na siya, iniisip ko, is what I'm feeding him really helping him grow?
You know what, Dims, I can totally relate to that because, my kids also were once upon a time picky eaters. And, as a young mom then, I had to be very intentional in how I explain things to my kids. As adults, we need to have that explaining. More so with children, we need to explain to them. We have to be creative in our storytelling. And with that creativity, I also learned how to hide those vegetables and those fruits para lang hindi nila mapansin. But also, I also involve them with preparing. And preparing for me meant I have a small vegetable garden at home. And so what I do is I ask them to help me grow those vegetables and I ask them to harvest those vegetables with me. So it became also like homeschooling. But as I got older, I realized, you know what? They're older now, they understand food. I need to be also firm. Whatever is prepared in the table, we eat that. That's a blessing. And everybody eats together. We don't become picky eaters here. We have to be thankful that there's food. But now that my kids are much, much older and they have more activities, they are very hungry kids. My kids are all athletes, so they train every day and sometimes twice, the most 3 times in a day. And they're into competitive sports every weekend, almost every weekend. I don't have normal weekends anymore. Because
what is a weekend? I don't even know what that means.
Exactly.
When your kids, Saturday.
Yeah, when your kids are into sports, your weekends are not the same anymore. So what happens is, I realized that nutrition really plays a big role in your kids when they are growing and when you're trying to make sure that they replenish that energy that has been used, especially for someone who trains every day. And then I realized that, nutrition plays a big part. Feeding that muscle and then making sure that it's replenished, they have the energy. And we're big on protein because protein is so important for my kids to make sure that their muscles are fed. Which leads me to this question. Doc Olay, can you help us understand what should a truly balanced meal for a child include?
All right. For proper growth and development, of course, we have to ensure that children are eating a well-balanced diet. And when we say balanced diet, it has to come from at least 5 of the 7 food groups per day. So you see it in our screen right now. So you have your meat, fish, legumes, nuts. You have your vegetables, of course, eggs, and even your dairy products. So, madami po dyan paulit-ulit vegetable. So, each group plays a different role in supporting height, strength, energy, and their overall development. But, the typical Filipino diet are heavy on carbohydrates, diba? Such as rice, and very few lang on protein, vegetables, or your dairy. And that is where your nutritional gap starts to form.
Doc, I couldn't agree with you more. It really sounds like a typical day at home. And much as I want to really say na, every day will be a great day for feeding, it's not reality. The reality is our schedules as parents would change, and some of us have to go out of the house to really work, and so we won't have time to be with the children, no? Pero sa akin talaga, yung mga certain areas na feeling ko nagkukulang kami sa before ako, lumaki ako sa tahanan na pag maraming kanin, healthy yun. Diba? When they say there's a lot of rice, that's when they say it's a complete meal. You know, I grew up in an environment like that, and so there was a lot of changing, not just in the mindset of my children, but also in my mindset as a parent. We all grew up in different homes and households, and the best thing about having all these resources, all these information now is that we are more informed. We are more aware. And si Ilio, I used to say when he was in my stomach, I ate a lot of meat. And so when he came out, I felt he already had a lot of muscles. Like, oh my God, may muscles na kagad yung bata. And so I realized that nutrition at the time was very, very important. But also, as soon as he came out, he started loving fruits and vegetables more. He's that kind of kid. And I'm not sure if it was because at that time, it was also what I was eating. And so he had a lot of exposure in the things that I love to eat. But of course now, as he is growing, ano nga ba yung tamang ipakain para kay Ilio kasi he's 3?
Yes.
Oo.
Because you've mentioned kanina, di ba, mahilig tayo sa rice. Laging merong rice. And
I think it's an Asian thing, no?
I know. So that's very common talaga. And that is where your Pinggang Pinoy takes into place. And your Pinggang Pinoy is a useful visual tool provided by the Food and Nutrition Research Institute, and it guides Filipino actually in consuming the right amount of food in every meal. So it is designed by using the go, grow, and glow food concepts and categories, and this can guide parents to plan a well-balanced and age-appropriate meal for their baons sa school.
I love that. You know, I love that Pinggang Pinoy visual tool, because now as parents, we don't have to second guess anymore what we should feed our kids. There's already that visual tool that we can follow. Hindi na siya overwhelming. But Doc Olay, how would missing out, and I'm sure a lot of parents are already wondering and are worried about this, no? How would missing out on these food groups affect a child's growth over time?
Right, so we've seen that even with 1 or 2 food groups that are consistently missing, kids may not achieve their optimal growth. But when these nutrient gaps are filled, you know, children bounce back. They regain their potential to grow strong, tall, and healthy, and even their immune system improves as well.
I love that. That's very reassuring, no? I'll quote that. Those nutritional gaps, when filled, children can bounce back. That's hope for us, right? But Doc Jun, I'm curious lang. Are nutritional supplements such as PediaSure Plus meant to address those nutritional gaps?
Yes. First, nutritional gaps, just a word on nutritional gaps. It is important to have that thinking that our children, although seemingly normal, may have nutritional gaps. That's what we call hidden hunger. And that is why when they're picky eaters, baka hindi diverse yung nutrients na pumapasok sa katawan nila. And therefore, we have to make sure that those nutritional gaps are filled in by oral nutritional supplements on top of the natural food intake that Dr. Ole beautifully described, 5 out of the 7 food groups on a regular basis. On top of that, in the Pinggang Pinoy, you saw that there's a glass of milk, right? So that can be PediaSure Plus, which provides complete and balanced nutrition. It has, when you say complete and balanced, it's the right blend and quantity or levels of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Now, what's interesting is that the proteins in PediaSure Plus are coming from 3 different sources. These are casein, whey, and soy, which makes sure that the child gets that diversified types of amino acids that the body needs for growth and development. It also has 23 micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals needed to support growth. And what is interesting and what's new about PediaSure Plus that we are talking about and launching today is the PeptiGro System. Now, the PeptiGro System is just a group of nutrients such as vitamin K2 or natural vitamin K2 and added arginine. These 2 nutrients help in promoting and supporting healthy growth in children. And of course, the newest kid in the block is CPP. or casein phosphopeptide. These are peptides, which means that these are smaller units of protein which are readily and easily absorbed through the gastrointestinal tract. And what happens is that these CPP molecules bind to ions such as zinc, iron, and calcium, which makes it more easily absorbed by the body. But I will not steal the thunder from our scientist from Singapore, Dr. Mandy Au, to further expand on the CPP.
Yes, I couldn't wait to talk about it. So casein phosphopeptides, or CPPs for short, we can think of them like nutrient protectors. So these are peptides that are found mainly in milk as well as dairy products, and they are helpful escorts that protect nutrients so that they are able to be absorbed in the digestive system. And so the problem that we have is that in children, many a time, even though they're consuming food that does have calcium, iron, and zinc, the body cannot absorb it properly. And the reason is because calcium, iron, and zinc, these bind very easily to other things in the food and other things in the intestine, in the digestive tract. And when they are bound, they cannot be absorbed because they're not soluble. So what CPP does is instead, it itself binds to these nutrients and protects them so that they stay soluble and they are able to be absorbed by the digestive system. And this is especially important for growing children because calcium is important for strong bones, zinc for the immune system, iron for energy, and all of them are needed for optimal growth. So when the diet has CPPs, this helps ensure that the nutrients can be absorbed and then used by the body where they are needed the most.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, this knowledge makes me appreciate how much science goes into helping kids grow strong and remain healthy. And it's even more exciting when that science is backed up by real measurable results. Which brings us to the next part of our conversation. Dr. Mandy, you recently authored a first-of-its-kind clinical study that shows how PediaSure Plus helps nutritionally at-risk children achieve height growth, health improvements. Could you walk us through the findings?
Yes, absolutely. So Abbott's Sprout study included 330 children, and it was done in Vietnam. So these children were 2 to 5 years old, and they were at risk or with undernutrition. So what this means is that these children, they were slightly short for their age, and underweight for their age. The children were split into 2 groups. One group received 2 servings of PediaSure Plus per day, and their families were also counseled on how to improve their dietary intake. And the other group just received dietary counseling alone, and they were allowed to continue their regular milk that they were already drinking. So the supplements were given for 8 months, and the children were also followed up in the study for 8 months. And so the results of the Sprout study showed that the children who drank 2 servings of PediaSure Plus per day, they had 2 times the growth improvement. And what's perhaps even more important is that they demonstrated quality growth. So quality growth in terms of a 50% greater gain in lean mass. So lean mass is muscle mass and organ mass, and they did not have any extra fat gain. So they were gaining weight, but this weight was towards the development of their muscles and their organs, and they had no extra fat gain. At the same time, the children also developed longer and stronger bones. So we measured their leg length, and we found they had longer legs. And they also had a 40% higher gain in bone mineral density, so their bones were becoming more mineralized or becoming stronger. So those are the physical improvements of the children. And when it came to functional and well-being improvements, firstly, we saw better immunity as the children were falling sick less. So they had 37% fewer sick days. And because they were not sick, they didn't miss school as much. So there was also 37% fewer missed school days. And then the parents reported that the children had better appetite, and they also had better dietary intake. When we measured their nutritional status, their vitamin D and vitamin K statuses were improved. So these are nutrients important for calcium absorption, calcium utilization, and overall bone development. And finally, the parents also reported that they had higher energy levels. So in terms of they were more alert, They were more curious, eager to learn and explore. So what all of this means and what's truly new from the Sprout study is that addressing undernutrition, which in our study was children who were too small for their age, it didn't just improve visible height gain, but also supported and had positive impacts in multiple dimensions of the child's development.
That's amazing. You know, it's so nice to hear that and reassuring to know that there's something like PediaSure Plus that can address all of these concerns. And with that said, seeing these positive results really show the profound impact of nutrition on quality growth. What about you, Dimples? What do you have to say about
You know,
that?
that makes me super happy. I'm a big science junkie. I really love listening to these things. Some of my uncles and my aunts, they like talk about different growth. And to my point a while ago, I was telling you that it's so difficult, especially when you have young athletes, no? Because you really have to bulk up on the muscle and not on the fat. And sometimes when you're a mom, and even for me, I've been a mom for about almost 22 years now, it's still a new concept to me. And so that's why everything that you have said about PediaSure Plus is quite, reassuring, as Cheska would say it, because then now I know that, okay, now I know why Ilo asks more questions. Now I know he runs faster than me now because of PediaSure Plus. I'm like, and you know what? I had a really, really interesting story with Alonso because he's 10. Yeah, and so he asked a lot of questions, and I told him that PediaSure Plus, the CPPs actually act as school buses. Just so he gets it at his level. Because often when you tell him something like doesn't digest it right away, but if you actually put it into a perspective that they truly understand as children, they get it. And I say, so now when you drink more milk, you eat more cheese, all the calcium, iron, and zinc over in that food will be absorbed better by your body because of that, because of the seaweed. Now he understands it more. And now I understand it
You're
more.
the best storyteller, mommy.
Yeah, because I do it for a living, I guess. I've been a storyteller for quite a while. But when you hear clinical proven results, yun ang pinakamalaking tulong talaga is because there is proof. And it's not just all on paper. There is proof that all his children, 330, correct? 330 already went through it and they were undernourished, and all of a sudden, it's a very holistic approach to making our children healthier and stronger.
Yeah, Dimples, you mentioned the word clinically proven, which is a key word for me as a doctor, because when you say it's clinically proven, it means that it is based on evidence. And as Dr. Mandy presented, the Sprout study was conducted in children in Southeast Asia using the new PediaSure formulation. And it was demonstrated over 8 months among 330 children. So it's really the longest and the biggest study of its kind in the world. No? So that's why it's a very important study. And Abbott has been a pioneer in nutrition research, and we do invest in research in clinical trials so that we can really provide evidence that the benefits of the oral nutritional supplements such as PediaSure Plus can actually do certain things like benefits on the child's growth. So we have proof, we have evidence. And at the same time, we use this evidence to generate more nutrition solutions or innovations that will be continually responsive and relevant to the doctor and to the child's needs, especially when it comes to growth. That is why we continuously do science-based nutrition products so that this can benefit people from all over the world, including Filipino children.
So in other words, PediaSure Plus is legit. Diba? Which brings us to a question many moms ask, when is the best time to start intervening or taking action? Doc Olay, what is your view on this?
Well, early childhood, especially during the first 5 years, is a window of rapid growth and development. And during this stage, children need essential nutrients to build strong bones, support brain development, and of course, strengthen their immune system. And if they're not getting enough during this time, and it would become, challenging to catch up later on. That is why feeding children proper nutrition consistently and early can make a big difference. So the earlier, the better talaga.
Agree. As with everything, Doc Olay, ako talaga, I'm so glad that we're hearing all these conversations today because at least we're being aware. This really puts everything into great perspective, especially for parents like myself. But it's not just about feeding them, it's about feeding them well at the time when our children really need it the most to achieve optimal growth. And when you say optimal growth, talagang in everything, no? Muscle, lean, brain also, and how they communicate themselves.
Exactly. And timing is just as important. And around 60% of the child's adult height is already achieved or determined by the age of 5. And during these 5 years, nutrition and environment account for around 80% of the growth, while genetics only contribute to around 20%. But when the child turns to around 5 to 10 years old, it becomes a 50-50 balance between your genetics and nutrition. That is why it is very important that and acting early gives us the greatest opportunity to support growth and development. And beyond 10, of course, kung naging early adolescent na po ang ating anak, and it is his or her final growth spurt, nutrition is still has a very good role in maximizing the nutrition. And of course, the recent National Nutrition Survey data shows that around 50% of Filipino children are stunted or at risk of stunting. So that's a big number, right? So sa mga mommies po dito, parang kung 50%, baka nandun yung anak ko. Diba? So, nakikita niyo po ba? Sino po yung mga mommy dito? Ayan. Ayan. Nakikita niyo po ba, di ba, pag pumupunta po kayo sa clinics ng inyong, sa pediatricians po ninyo, pinaplot po nung kinukuhanan siya ng weight, ng height, and then pinaplot po nung inyong pediatrician. Nakikita niyo po ba yung curve dun sa growth chart? Napapansin niyo po ba yon? So yun po yung mga ginagamit po namin mga pediatricians para makita po yung pag-growth spurt, yung mga ang tawag dito, growth chart, yun, minimeasure po namin yung weight and height ng mga anak ninyo para makita po namin kung tama po ba, naaangkop po ba yung kanilang tangkad sa kanilang edad. And syempre, diba, tinatanong rin po namin, gaano po ba kadalas magkaroon ng pagkakasakit ang ating mga anak. Pag pumupunta po tayo sa ating mga sa clinics, check po lahat ng inyong mga doktor.
Because whenever we would go to our pediatrician, we would have a chart. And so when the kids are a bit older, like Alonzo is now 10, it becomes a source of insecurity for them when they see that they're quite stunted compared to the other kids. So, this also plays a really big role in their mental health, even as children. And so I think, at the time when the kids were younger, Kali when she was younger, now Alonzo 10 and Ilio at 3, I honestly didn't realize how much of an impact that would be. Yung early consumption of proper nutrition that could make to the lives of our children. Now I'm more intentional in what I feed them. I really make sure that our bonding moments are really meal times, because as a working mom myself, sometimes I'm very guilty. Like, you just feed them whatever is there. But really now we get to plan. We get to, okay, what are we having today? And it becomes a more exciting time for my kids to be eating. And I'm so glad that Ilio now, who seems to be bigger than Kuya, in comparison. So Kuya now is more, he tries to drink more PediaSure Plus to really try to get onto the bus. And he's like, oh my gosh, I don't. So Ilio is 3, but his height is for almost like a 6-year-old. Yes, because, so I'm like, how many PediaSure Pluses have you been drinking? Yeah. So now we really make sure that everything that he intakes really has an effect with the optimal growth window, which is first 5 years. I can still make sure that everything is at the right time. And ang dami-dami kong natututunan ngayon sa inyo, Doc June, Doc Ala, and of course, Dr. Mandy. So I'm so grateful that we're having this conversation. I'm so sure that everybody who's listening in also, no?
Yes, very true. You drove a very important point that early intervention is key in the first 5 years of life, because that is when the first growth spurt occurs. And therefore, you have to support it nutritionally, by giving the child the building blocks and the energy needed so that the child can unlock his or her full growth potential. However, we can only intervene early if we are aware and if we can detect that the child has some maybe growth issues or maybe hopefully walang growth issues. But how do we check that? As Dr. Ole mentioned, we have certain tools. We have the growth chart, the WHO growth chart, which compares children to their peers. And you can see there the normal height for age, the child is at risk or the child is stunted. Now, but there is an easier way. As you can see on the screen, there is now an Abbott growth calculator. You can use your phones, scan the QR code on the screen, and it will lead you to the website where you have the Abbott growth calculator. Now, how do you use the growth calculator? It will just prompt you to key in certain information, such as the child's birthday, so that you can compute for the age, the child's height in centimeters, and the child's gender. Kasi magkaiba yung growth trajectory ng babae at ng lalaki. So kailangan i-input nyo yung tatlong information na yon so that you can get a reading. The reading will provide you whether the child is growing normally, whether the child is at risk of stunting, and whether the child is stunted. However, this is just one measurement in time. So this is really just for you to be aware and to reinforce that behavior, that important behavior of nutrition screening in measuring the child's height. Because height is a more important indicator of chronic or long-term nutritional status compared to weight. That is why we focused on height here. So having said that, it is important to know this information and bring this information to your doctor, to the child's doctor or pediatrician, so that the doctor, if he has growth issues, he can take some serious steps over time, because that is the best way to see if the child's trajectory of growth is really going through the normal curve expected for his gender and for his age. So yeah, those are the things that the parents can do now easily.
I love how you said that, Doc, that you can do it and you can do it very easily, because that's very key, no? The key now, I think, for all of us is really to find power in information and being aware. And I've used it. It really is super easy to use. And tayo naman kasi we cannot address it unless we know of it, diba? You can only address something if you are fully aware. And it's one thing to be feeding our children well, but knowing where they stand is in comparison to their peers or kids their age provides useful insights talaga to take action. This way you can present it to your doctor and say, Doc, I've used the calculator and this is how it looks like for this child of mine, for this child of mine. What can we do?
And that awareness is powerful, and not only that, it is helpful because the earlier you recognize the nutrition gap, the earlier you can intervene to prevent, long-term developmental delays.
Yes, grabe. I'm learning so much listening to our doctors here, and of course also with you, Dims, no? And I realized, actually I get a lot of people saying, matangkad naman yung asawa mo, kaya matangkad yung kids mo. But it's not true, As what we've heard earlier, 20% lang ang genetics. Nutrition really plays a big part. So for me, the key takeaways here are this. Number one, we have to act early. And then track consistently. We need to know what's happening, diba? Know our kids' height. Is there any intervention that we can do? And of course, we also need to choose nutrition that supports optimal growth. Not just grow taller faster, but also healthier and stronger overall.
Right, and of course, proper nutrition is the foundation for growth and health, and can support, of course, children through the critical growth periods. And early childhood, especially the first 5 years, are not only crucial for physical growth, but also for developing strength, resilience, and immunity.
That's very right, Dr. Olay. And I would like to emphasize the importance of quality growth. So siguro sa atin, marami sa atin, just think, when we talk about growth, iniisip natin weight and height. Measure yung timbang, we measure yung height in centimeters, but there is also an important concept now that Dr. Mandy also explained a while ago, which is quality growth, bone mineralization, bone density. in other aspects like immunity and other things related or factors that may impact growth. That is why quality growth is important for us to keep in mind when choosing the right or the proper nutrition for our children. So just like what Dr. Ole mentioned, 5 out of the 7 food groups. And of course, if needed, ONS, oral nutritional supplements, would be beneficial if the child may have nutritional gaps, if the child is a picky eater, or gusto mo lang dagdagan yung kanyang nakukuhang nutrisyon sa kanyang everyday meals. So PediaSure Plus contains a complete and balanced nutrition with also proteins from different sources and also 23 micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals to support growth.
Right, and from the perspective of a scientist, the science is clear. Our research shows that addressing undernutrition with nutritional supplements go beyond just improving visible height, but they promote overall quality growth.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm super grateful that today we're all talking about this. As a mom, ang dami-dami nating iniisip. I have to think about 200 million things. The items I have to pick for my children, and one lives abroad, 2 are here, 1 girl, 2 boys, all these things they want to do. But really today has reminded me that being informed is very empowering. In fact, I came here knowing everything that we've already talked about, and still, I learned so many other things from you, Doc Mandy, Doc Ola, and Doc Juno. We don't have to do it alone. I mean, being a parent, it doesn't come with a manual. Nobody really knows what to do. We're just all here trying to help one another, and back with science, with a lot of results, and also with our dear doctors. I love how we're helping one another, and there are tools and resources to guide us, and we can make better choices every day. It really takes a village to raise a child, sometimes even bigger villages. 3, 4, 5 villages to really raise our children right. And with, I love whenever you would say proper growth and optimal growth, and not just with the weight, but also with the height. I love how our experts and our doctors really took the time today, as well as all our resources and tools available for all of us to really check out. So maraming salamat to PediaSure Plus. Thank you.
Yes. Me too, Dims. I've learned a lot from our experts, and I've also learned a lot from you. I think, my takeaway here is, as parents, we really need to be intentional. Because who else will like their children but us? And we have the power to help our children grow stronger, healthier, and feeding them right. So doesn't necessarily mean healthy, or you're. And with all of this information, PediaSure Plus, who consistently keeps advocating on this, we're so blessed because, we have all this information, and we have all these tools that can help us make sure that our children can grow properly. And, I always believe that a healthy home is a happy home. And with that said, I would like to say thank you to our doctors, Doc Mandy, Doc Jen, Doc June, and of course, Dimple. I'm so happy to be part of our family. Welcome to the PediaSure Plus family.
Now, we know you have a few more questions, so we're opening the floor for our Q&A session. To our